Alright, thank you for the time that you has given to us to explain our topic that is about surveys and deep reading. And before that, let me introduce our group. Me, Nesti Arnihulu, as the moderator and also the last speaker. Ceria Putri Damaihulu is the first speaker. Asirida Waruhu as the second speaker, and the last Delang Septiani as the third speaker. So for the our friends, times is yours.
Alright, thanks for the time that given to me. Now I would like to explain our material about definition of surface reading. Nah, what is surface reading? Surface reading is when examining a text or other cultural production, and then the important meanings are in the foreground rather than the background. Surface reading, as understand it is principally a theory of negation, opposite to the dominant practice of symptomatic reading. And the next advantage of surface reading, the first, ability to review a greater number of publications. The second, location. And the third, it favors searching and browsing the internet. And the fourth, may promote concentration. And the last, helps make connections between concepts. That's all our explanation. Thank you.
Alright, now I will explain about the characteristic surface reading. There are six the characteristic surface reading. For the first is it is informative. Informative is a superficial reading allows us to get an idea of the publication we are reviewing, and it will be able to survey us for the research or the work that we are doing. The second is it's a query. It's a query is a reading is superficial when we do it as the bears a going through the page without stopping. That is why it can also be considered a form of speed. The third is it is not a linear reading. Why the surface reading it is not a is not a linear reading? Because when you do a superficial reading, you read the main ideas and jump to the next paragraph it is read. Between the lines uh, to the information that does not interest the paragraph in the paragraph. Now I will continue explain about the characteristic of surface reading. For the fourth, the characteristic of surface reading is it can be a reading or review. It can be reading or it can be a reading or review. Often a superficial is often a superficial reading occurs because it is a reading the revision of materials that already been read. The fifth is done as part of job and less often for pressure. So in this part, the superficial reading is done to acquire practical information, or as when we review a tourist guide or an encyclopedia. And the last, the characteristic of surface reading is it is a attribute or characteristic of virtual reading. In this part, the different experience and document experience have profile that reading on the screen or digital virtual. So that's all my explanation about the material, and thank you.
Now I want to explain about deep reading. Deep reading is an activity process of reading thoughtfully and deliberately to increase one's understanding and enjoyment of a text. Contrast with skimming or shallow reading, also call it slow reading. So that's all my explanation today, and thank you.
Alright, we are continue that is about differences between surface reading and deep reading. So in here, there are four differences between surface and deep reading. The first is velocity deep reading is slower than superficial reading. It does not skip lines or paragraphs. The superficial one is faster and jumps, or it skips words and lines. So in here, the first differences between surface and deep reading is when we read some text, when we use strategy deep reading, we must read the text with slow. But when we use the surface reading strategy, we more read the text most fast than deep reading. So the second difference is intensity of the superficial reading thus above, seeking to get a general idea, but deep reading stop at the concept and ideas contained in each sentence. So in here, when we use surface reading strategy, we must to get the general idea. So we can underline in here surface reading is to get the general idea. But in deep reading, we can read the text but we stop at the concept and ideas contained. The next difference is form and content. Superficial reading tries to capture the general idea without dwelling on the style or the formal aspect of the language. But in deep reading, what is said and how it is said is important. So in here, in the surface reading, the readers only to capture the general idea. But in deep reading, what is the content, what is all of the content of the text is important. So the last difference is exploration and interpretation. The superficial reading is an exploratory reading. It allows us to know new books and contents, while deep reading is interpretive, analytical, seek to understand and delve into the content. So in here, surface reading is an exploratory reading. So when we read some books, we can know what is the content, what is the new content of the book. But when we try to read the text with deep reading strategy, we can understand and delve into the content.